We can also, do you want questions out? You want to talk about your history a little bit?
Well, the last thing I want to do is talk about myself, except to say that I sit here as a 61-year-old. Tony, you and I are the same age.
Wow.
Passionate about teaching and passionate about, the human body. And it's ironic that with COVID having been something that has impacted our lives in so many ways. And I think there are so many correlations to COVID, how the medical establishment and the government have looked at it and treated it, and how we've looked at it as individuals. I think there's a lot of correlations, parallels between that and how we eat and how we look at our own health and taking responsibility for it. And ultimately, and this is really important, I think, too, we all have, I think, shared the pain of the loss of Chick Corea, and that came back to me. I mean, one of the most iconic musicians, certainly in my lifetime, who has gone way too soon because of a disease that fundamentally, again, a lot of correlations between it, COVID, viruses, the things that we're all facing. And the idea, and my passion is to what I call square the curve, which is to say live a long and healthy, vibrant life, and then one day go to sleep, not wake up, hopefully at about 120. And I think fundamentally where it comes back for us as musicians is, and this is where I feel the pain of having lost Chick, and now Gary, of course, is not playing anymore because of health-related issues. We can go down the list. We can't fully express ourselves through the course of our life in the ways that we really want to if we're not healthy. If we don't feel good, our health is the most important thing. Without it, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. And ironically, you can spend your whole life learning how to express yourself as an artist and then lose the ability to do it because you aren't feeling good. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'm passionate about. I spent my whole life thinking about it and trying to share what I've learned. And ironically, of course, in that video, I was talking about tissue health. But the first thing I'd start with today, if somebody asked me what's the most important thing to talk about, is diet, is how we eat, is what we put in our mouths. Because what we know, we're not told this by the government or the medical establishment, but what we know about most chronic diseases is that what we eat is the biggest factor, because most, including cancer, are metabolic diseases. They occur within the mitochondria. It's dysfunctional respiration within the cell. In simple terms, how we eat has a greater impact on our health. I mean, I've done 9 Ironman triathlons, run dozens of marathons, been a competitive endurance athlete my whole life. But unequivocally, how I eat, when I eat, and what I eat is the most important thing with regard to our health. So that's where I'd start. But yeah, I mean, and I feel badly because Tony knows this, and then I'll stop. I feel badly that I haven't shared more on Vibe's workshop, but as he knows, about 2 years ago, I turned my attention back into my own business to grow it, went through a little bit of rebranding to bring a lot more programs online so that folks could purchase programs to use to try to basically replicate myself and take what I do as a one-on-one coach and therapist and make it available to more people. So I went into a deep hole for about a year to completely rebuild the website and the whole marketing thing as well too. So I haven't been as active on Vibe's workshop and as I would have otherwise liked. Anyway, I'll stop there. I'd be happy to take questions.
What's the name of your website?
Well, my company is pursuitathleticperformance.com. If you go there, it'll say online sports therapy programs for runners and endurance athletes. But please know that all the programs that are there and all the information that is there is for any and every human being. I always say movement and health are universal. How we express it is up to us as individuals. So as Vibe players, we shouldn't think of ourselves as vibe players. We should think of ourselves as human beings. Become a better human being, and then how you express that betterness as a human being is playing a vibraphone. But for someone else, it may be running across the field. For me, it's going to race a 5K or doing a triathlon or picking up and swinging a kettlebell. But movement expression is what we do as individuals, but movement and health are universal, right? Having a more stable core, a more stable and stronger set of hips, appropriate levels of flexibility, good joint function, because you can't move where you can't move, right? As soon as the joint stops functioning as it should, as it was designed, then some other body part has to pick up the slack. When a joint can't move, it can't move. So issues then develop from there. That's universal, regardless of what we do as individuals.
So I guess there's preventative, and then like there's what do young people do to ensure a good, a good career playing the instrument, and then what do us older people do to minimize the damage? Because man, I mean, I've got tons of damage from everything, just from
For sure. Well,
yeah.
Tony, there's so many parallels with music and health, or performance or movement, right? The parallels are all there. It starts with having a better understanding of your body. So so much of what is inside my site and in the programs is just helping people to understand their bodies better. It's ironic that the average person knows more about their smartphone or their automobile than their body and how it functions, right? And how it actually works. So we're not taught this. We're not taught, how should your hips function? What does it mean to move through your hips? Why does your back hurt? Or what is good joint range of motion, right? Because it is about those basics and fundamentals, and then understanding compensation, because that is the key. The human body is a fantastic compensator, right? And when we're looking at traumatic brain injury or something similar, we marvel at the ability for, someone loses a portion of their brain because of an injury, and some other portion of the brain is able to adapt and compensate. And over time, that individual can progress. But when it comes to your body and movement, compensation is not what you want, because over time, here's an analogy. Let's say you're walking down the street and you get a pebble in your shoe, and you're like, "Wow, that hurts." You limp for 1 or 2 steps. You reach down, take your shoe off, empty get rid of the pebble, put your shoe back on, and no harm, no foul. You walk on down. But what if you're walking or hiking or running, and the pebble's there, and you don't stop, and you keep it in there for like a mile? Now you've got a little bit of a bruise and it hurts. So you're walking with a little bit of a limp. Well, what if you kept the pebble there for a year, right? Because that's what happens as, you get that little tweak in your low back, or something hurts in your hip, right? Or even saw a pain in your shoulder or your elbow, but you keep it there. So now some other body part has to compensate. Your brain doesn't care, right? When you're holding the sticks and playing the instrument, your brain doesn't care how you do it. It's just following orders to make the movement happen. The problem is there are 17 muscles that attach to your shoulder blade, and they all have to work in order for your shoulders to be stable, right? And as soon as those muscles are not working as they should, right, some compensation develops. Now you're going to have an issue. You have an overuse. Perhaps now your shoulder isn't as stable. Your back's not functioning as it should. Now problems develop. And again, we all know what, this forward posture that can develop over time. Your body just learns, hey, this is normal, right? When it actually isn't, because now this is super tight and restricted. This is weak and extended and lengthened. And now we've got dysfunction, and now the shoulder isn't positioned as it should. We start to get pain, and it just becomes a cascade from there. So to answer your question, Tony, it really starts with just educating ourselves, understanding and learning more about the body. And then it's all basics and fundamentals. What I do as a coach is I say, hey, let's look at a joint first and foremost. And that's what I talked about a little bit in that post, Carolyn, is the controlled articulation. Let's just look and see if the joint is functioning as it should. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have to understand, Tony, that especially from the age of 30 onward, we start to become more aware of it as we get a little older, and certainly by the time we hit 40. But if you don't use it, you lose it. The human body needs physical stress, right? So you become weaker every day that you don't challenge tissue to adapt, it becomes weaker, right? Like in the practice room, I always used to tell myself every day, you're not staying the same. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. There's no such thing as staying the same. Like, you know, as players, if you just go from one day to the next and you're not consciously trying to get better, you're getting a little worse. Something's slipping. That's just the reality of what it means to be an instrumentalist or an artist. But the human body is the same. If you don't challenge it in some way to be more mobile or stronger, and I think of mobility as strength training, the tissue gets weaker. And all of a sudden, we reach the point where we're all, like, some of us looking around at people around us, we see a lot of dysfunction, people walking with pain, not able to do the things that they want. That didn't happen, you know, in one day. It happened as a gradual degradation over time. So, I mean, I wake up every day. One of the t-shirts that I wear is "Stay Hungry," right? I wake up every day and I got to earn it every day physically. Every day I have to go back and, again, go back to the basics and fundamentals. Again, there's the parallel with music. It always comes back to basic, fundamental stability and strength, joints functioning as they should.
So what do you do every day, particularly for your playing?
Well, I think, again, I come back to trying to be a better human being. I mean, that sounds simple, but I always say that the minute we as a species left the food chain, shit began to hit the fan, right? Because as soon as we didn't have to run away from things that were chasing us or go after the food we needed to survive, it was all over. And certainly the very first of what I think of the first agricultural revolution, which is about 12, 13,000 years ago, when humans started to congregate in larger groups and we started to introduce farming as a way to feed large groups of people, that was the next phase of when the shit hit the fan, because that was the introduction of grains and a lot of other processed foods that have become what we have today. We can all walk into the grocery store and buy crap to put into our bodies. So from a movement perspective, Tony, what I just think, like, man, I go, what do I need to be a better human being today? So I got to pay attention to my joint health. I've got to do some strength training. I've got to look at where weak links or limiters are for me. And again, that's a variety of things. And I look at it all as my price, the price I pay to play. Because I go out and, you know, race every weekend and, you know, go ride my mountain bike on gnarly trails and do a lot of what I think are fun things to do. But I have to pay the price to do it, you know.
What do you mean pay the price to do it?
Do the work, which is to say, if it's 10 minutes of focused body weight strength training, if it's, you know, a few minutes of controlled articulation for the joint, which could mean a host of different things. Looking at the hips and the shoulders, moving those joints through a range of motion, looking to develop and improve upon that range of motion. Looking for weak links. Again, the same thing you do as a player, we have to take the same approach to our body. That's what we're talking about here today, Tony, right? Is you have been, you would be the first person to say that almost to your detriment, you've been obsessed with playing the vibraphone better, becoming a better artist, right? And all I'm saying is that we need the same kind of approach with respect to our health, right? What do we need to do to improve in that respect, right? It can be as something as simple as saying, where are the processed foods that I'm eating that I need to get out, right? Because nutrition is really simple. We need real food, not processed food, right? Not seed oils, not trans fats. Those foods, how can I take those things out? And the other thing, as it relates to nutrition, and honestly, I've been doing this. I know it's become a fad over the last few years. I've been doing this literally for 30 years, and that's what's known now as intermittent fasting. I think of it as time restricted eating, but it's become popularized as intermittent fasting. But I go, like, I'm sitting here right now. I haven't eaten yesterday since, no, I'm not advocating this, but I haven't eaten yesterday since noontime. And I rode my mountain bike for 90 minutes this morning, and I trained yesterday afternoon. I could feel absolutely and completely normal. That's really hard for most people to relate to because we have lots of cravings that fundamentally come out of the sugars that are in our diet. So the average person has no idea what it means to be hungry. I usually don't experience hunger, for 36 hours having not eaten. And I can go up and completely go about my normal routine. So I mean,
36 minutes.
Yeah, right, exactly. No, 36 hours. So anyway, back to the point, and I'm advocating, I definitely advocate that the average person should be very comfortable with going 12 to 18 hours without eating. If you're hungry in 3 hours, that's not hunger, that's a craving, right? That's a biochemical process within the body that says, give me some more of that sugar, right? And as soon as that sugar comes into your body, you get an insulin response in response to that rise in blood sugar. And as insulin rises, your concurrent risk for chronic disease also rises. There's a very strong parallel between insulin and our health. So understanding the difference between a craving and actual hunger is a big step toward improving your health. So again, Tony, just basics and fundamentals, man. Basics and fundamentals. And the problem we have, and it's what I want with the vibraphone, is we want it all at once, right? Like, I want to become a better improviser like this week, right? And of course, I compare myself, to you or to Randy or any one of the players that are here that may have been working on this craft, for as long as I've been, running. So it doesn't happen overnight, but we can do one thing today that'll move us closer. And again, it's always about basics. Taking the crap out of your diet, doing a little bit of body weight oriented exercise, and just understanding how to do it. Understanding how I can look at my joints and begin to explore that range of motion and then improve it. Those are simple things, but they require effort. You got to do the work.
Okay, well, I have a whole bunch of questions. I mean, I could talk to you all day about this. And actually, just hearing you talk, that helps me get a little inspirational about doing it. I try in my way. I think I try hard to do stuff. When I still have resistance bands from your workshop. I still use them. I do stuff, but anybody want to butt in with a question?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yeah.
So I hear everything you're saying, and I'm totally with you. But there's a phenomenon that I've noticed over my years doing this, is that from time to time, if I break away from at least some aspect of my physical practicing, whatever it is, whether it's doing one particular kind of exercise or something, that I've been working on, say I break away from it for a couple of months even. Yes, I do lose it. But when it comes back, when I start working on it again, and when it comes back, the stuff that I'm focusing on comes back, and it feels to me as though the muscle memory does return for the good stuff, but some of the bad habits go away. Is that just me, or is that something about that's actually happening?
Well, Randy, that's a great question and a great observation. Everything I'm talking about And I mean nutrition, I mean how we think about our bodies. And I also mean the physical practice of training, of exercising. It is all a skill. It's all a skill. If you haven't read The Talent Code, that's a great book as an introduction to how the body, the brain learns, right? And how we learn skills and where talent actually comes from. And I'm sure any great player that you know, and maybe even folks here, could look back on their early development and skills that they learned at a very early stage and how much that really impacted it. But here's the thing, Randy, what I mean by fundamentally about that is there's no such thing as muscle memory. That doesn't exist, okay? No such thing. If you take the bicep muscle out of the human body, or any muscle out of the human body, you got a slab of meat. That's all you have. What, however, is the key is the nervous system and skill development. So you absolutely, if you work on any exercise and you develop some level of skill, just like with playing, and that gets imprinted on your nervous system a little bit and also within the joints, because the joints themselves are like little brains. There are mechanoreceptors and other basically proprioceptors within the joint that literally have an intelligence, right? So that imprinted skill remains, right? But what goes away, of course, is your ability to access the skill and progress the skill, right? But it doesn't go away. So there's always, where we get a lot of benefit, I personally take development there is far better than 60 minutes of bad exercise where we're not imprinting good skills. That's why I say it comes back to the basics and fundamentals, always and forever. You know, like an exercise like the push-up, if done well, is an incredible total body exercise that can build and improve joint mobility, core stability, hip stability, and strength. But done poorly, like most people do it, it becomes a sloppy exercise that doesn't produce very much benefit. So a lot of skill development and all of this stuff. It's all skills.
What's a bad push-up? I do them every day, and well, I do them every other day.
Well, think of it this way, Tony. Time under load and radiation of tension through the body, right? Those two concepts. So a bad push-up is one where you go down and up and nothing's really integrated and your body's not straight and things are just kind of sloppy. A good push-up is where you create good integration, good alignment, you're radiating tension throughout the body. Everything moves as a single unit. And you're focusing not on reps, but on time under tension, because that's how you get stronger, by lifting time under tension.
Does that mean slower is better?
Slower is usually always better. It's better from a viewpoint of safety, but it's also better from purely from a viewpoint of getting stronger. There's huge myths in the fitness industry, and one of them is that, you know, plyometrics and jumping and power and all of those kinds of things are, first of all, something that's really important and valuable. I would argue that, but secondly, they're high-level skills. They're frosting on the cake. So slow is always better. And in radiation of tension, like I could do a push-up right here in my chair, and I don't even need the floor, right? Let me just, and I'll show you this for a second. This is just to demonstrate this idea of radiating tension. So imagine that's the floor right there. So I set myself up. So I'm starting to squeeze and engage my back here, stiffening my arms. All right, I'm squeezing my glutes. I've got my cores engaged. Now I'm going to lower myself. Radiating tension from within, massive tension. I'm going to push the floor away. So that was probably 15 or 20 seconds of time under tension. Didn't even need the floor to do it. created integration through my entire body. Everything was engaged, far better than, you know, sloppy push-ups where we're just trying to knock out as many as we can.
I've also heard time under tension being really good for people who like can't do pull-ups right away, but just to get on a bar and to maybe just slowly release and do that as kind of a time under tension exercise versus just like trying to just like do pull-ups.
Just hanging on the bar for any length of time is far and away one of the most valuable things that you can do from the standpoint of upper body stability and strength. And the key there, again, I'll imagine I'm on the bar, and I'm not sure if you can see this, but if I'm just hanging on the bar here, one thing I want to do is just try to engage my back, right? So you can see that I'm pulling my shoulders down, immediately firing all those stabilizing muscles around the shoulder blades. Absolutely, man. If you could just get on the bar and spend like 15 seconds there, and then do that 3 or 4 times, and then extend it to 20, and then to 30. And then negative is where you're lowering yourself down, right? And then get yourself up, and then, and again, that's a pull-up, right? So we could do it as a chin-up as well. But if you can get yourself up above the bar, doing partial reps there, and again, thinking about time under load and just trying to spend more time, because it's basic muscle physiology. Follow me here for a second. Getting stronger is really simple. You've got a motor unit within the muscle cell, right? Lots of motor units, and they're all different sizes, and they respond to load. That's how a motor unit works. That's how your muscle works. So if there's a small amount of load, only small motor units and only a few of them will kick in order to meet that demand, right? Motor units are on or off. It's not gradual, right? So the bottom line is, when you're focusing on time under load, you start to fatigue those motor units that have kicked in. And so more have to join. And if the load is increased, like hanging on a bar, that's a significant amount of load, especially for a guy like Tony, is as big as he is, right?
Yes. Yes.
So larger motor units have to begin to kick in to meet the demand. And what you're feeling is a lot of fatigue and even some discomfort, but the risk is very, very small because you're not generating a lot of force within the muscle. You're just getting a lot more motor units to have to kick in. So the reality is I could improve my strength much more by spending 1 or 2 minutes on a bar just hanging and doing partial reps than if I did, 20 really sloppy chin-ups where I wasn't really engaged in making sure everything was functioning as it should. Although, listen, anything on a bar is valuable.
Any other questions from anybody else? Becky?
Hey, Becky.
Hey, I had slap tear surgery at the end of the year, like December 30th. So I'm like, I don't know, 10 weeks out. And I've been trying to do
what do you have coming up?
No, I mean, I had slap tear repair.
Okay.
And I'm having a lot of trouble with range of motion out to the side right here. I have like grinding and pinching, and it's very difficult to get a good quality smooth motion here. And I've been trying to do the wall angels exercise that you showed. I can only really get the elbow to the wall after about 45 minutes of mobilization work on the chest and the back of the shoulders. And so my question is, in relation to your statement about using it or losing it, if you have restricted range of motion, you can't achieve full range of motion cleanly, should you not attempt to use it until you have prepared yourself to do it? Or like in my case, everything that's above shoulder level is really difficult for me because the scap stabilizers just can't pull the scapula down far enough when the arm is up here. So when I try to do the wall angels and I come up here, I get that terrible pain. Should I be avoiding this until my progress in PT is better, or should I be trying to do it now?
Well, there's no simple answer to your question, actually. It's a confluence of things. First and foremost, you don't want to push yourself into any position which elicits pain, right? Pain is a signal from the brain that there's a problem. So you don't want to go there. However, discomfort is something you're going to have to embrace, because when you get to end ranges of motion, and improving those end ranges and developing control at those end ranges is a process that's not comfortable, right? It's inherently uncomfortable. So my question to you would be, and you don't necessarily have to answer it, but what are you specifically doing in PT to work toward those end ranges and begin to not only develop the control, the scapular control, but also work on where the restrictions are within the joints? And there's multiple joints there, because that's the work that's really valuable, right? Working at that end range. So when I think of mobility work, I think of strength training at end range, strength training at end range. So we find that end range wherever it exists for you right now, regardless of what joint we're talking about. And then we're going to do some isometric strength training at that end range. And what will happen is we are teaching the brain, number one, that it is safe to go there. So we're gaining control of that movement, but we're also innervating and engaging the tissue, right? So moving passively into a range of motion and out of it does very little good. This is the problem with a lot of physical therapy, right? I can seek a range of motion and then I reach a point where I can't go any further. Well, if I just come back out of that range of motion, I haven't done anything actively to, number one, improve it, and number two, tell my brain it's safe to go there. To answer your question about the wall slides, that's really a multifaceted maintenance exercise. And it's also an exercise that teaches us where our limitations are, right? But I don't think of it as a rehabilitative exercise specifically for you, because your issues are localized within the joint, right? When you have an injury, whether it's a tear, certainly if there's any surgery involved, right? Very invasive to that body part. What you have more than anything else is weakness and instability at the outset of that surgery or challenge. So your primary goal is to develop strength, right? As I said, mobility in my mind is strength training at end range. As you gain that control and strength, the range of motion begins to expand as the tissue adapts. Very rarely is passive work ever valuable in this regard, right? And it's one of the reasons why, listen, I think yoga is a fantastic practice. There's a lot of benefit that can come from it for a lot of people, but rarely do I ever advise it for anybody, because a lot of it is passive, right? So we bump up against a range of motion that our body doesn't want to go into for whatever reason. Like I can imagine Tony going into a yoga class and going through it. He'd be frustrated in so many ways. He'd reach an end point. And I only mention Tony because I've seen a little bit about how he moves, right? But it's not to pick on him.
Pick on me.
But the point is he'd reach an end range of motion where he couldn't go into a movement or a position, and he'd just get frustrated and then come back out of it. So he'd be much more valuable for him to say, okay, here's this roadblock, here's this range of motion, whatever it is, hip flexion, hip extension, rotation of the hip, movement of the thoracic spine, whatever. Work on that specific range of motion. In other words, target it, which doesn't happen in yoga. So again, not to pick on them, and to your point, Becky, targeting that area to gain control and strength at end range, right? and understanding that fundamentally, your brain's not going to let you move into any position that it doesn't feel is safe, right? Tightness in a muscle is not that you need to stretch it most of the time, right? This is one of the big myths in fitness. Everybody always asks, should I stretch or not? And I always go, no, or yes, right? Depending. The point is your brain will stop you from moving into any position that it feels is unsafe or unstable. The analogy is a whiplash that, let's say I'm driving on the road, I get rear-ended and I've suffered a whiplash, and all of a sudden I can't move, right? That's fundamentally my brain saying, I'm locking this down because I feel that there's a trauma here and it's not safe to move this, right? So that's neurological stiffness and tension. So I usually say most movement issues are stability issues. Once that shoulder of yours is more stable and the joint is able to move and those tissues are all functioning as they should, and that's only going to happen with very specific kinds of training. Only then will your brain start to say, okay, I'll release some tension and let you go there. And then you can train at those increasingly deeper ranges of motion. Does that help?
A little bit. What if the muscle actually has been physically shortened? Because they told me that they stitched down the biceps down to the bone. They attach it, and so my arm's been really sore just every day for months now. How do you stretch that if it literally got shorter?
Well, I mean, if you have first of all, every single one of us in every single muscle and every single joint and every bone is shaped differently and is of a different length. And that's even true inherently within us. We're not symmetrical creatures. Human beings are asymmetrical, right? So we accept that, and that's good. So you've got a muscle, which it may be one of the rotator cuff muscles infraspinatus or supraspinatus, whatever. But if you've got a muscle that is now functionally shorter, right, you may have a limitation which is with you for the rest of your life. But that doesn't mean that you can't work on it and gradually improve what that range of motion is. If there's one thing you guys take home from what this session that we're doing today, the body is amazing at healing itself if we stop picking the scab. If we stop doing the thing to us that is causing the issue and just come back to the basics and fundamentals, feed it better and treat it better and seek to be better human beings, the body can heal itself. So that tissue can gradually lengthen, provided you allow the brain to feel safe so you can move into deeper ranges of motion and do the work. And the actual mobility work that I would recommend for someone like you, it's not easy to do. It's uncomfortable. So you have to kind of embrace it, because it's hard to go to an end range of motion. Let me give you a specific example of what I mean. One of the things that I work on personally is pigeon position. You may know this in yoga, from yoga. And there's a right way to do pigeon and a wrong way to do it, but I'm just going to demonstrate it here on the table, right? So this is axial rotation of the hip.
Mm-hmm.
See that? So the way that I would work on this range of motion for myself or anyone I'm working with is to position myself in this position. And then once I spend a little bit of time stretching here to get to that end range of motion, is strength training here by literally driving my leg and hip into the table, and then conversely trying to lift my leg up away from the table. So basically it's progressive and regressive angular loading of the tissue, all designed to help the hip feel safer in that position. That's true for any joint in the body, including, by the way, the wrist. That's one video that I put up in Vibe's workshop, right? So it's funny, I did that push-up. Most people do not have enough flexion of the wrist to do a push-up without really pissing this tissue off, right? And this is one of the things that can happen over time. Obviously, as mallet players, we're working through an active range of motion with our wrists. But if we lose that range of motion, the only way to get it back is to actively train at that end range. And that's one of the things that I guided folks through in that video on Vibes Workshop.
Oh, sorry, one last thing.
Yeah.
It feels like the movement from down here all the way up to up here is it probably doesn't feel like this to most people, but it actually feels like two separate motions for me, because there seems to be like a separation between getting here to here and getting from there to here. It seems like different groups of muscles are involved in making that continuous motion. So when we talk about end of range, is it that there's more than one end of range here, or do I want to always be thinking about this as being end of range?
No, I mean, that's a great observation, Becky. So, yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier, sort of, you know, in passing, that there's 17 muscles that attach to your shoulder blade. That's true, right? So we're not just looking at the range of motion of the arm bone into the acetabulum, right, into that capsule. That's an operation, if you will, that's controlled by your rotator cuff muscle. So we're talking about that internal, external rotation, and even through other planes of motion. So there's that, but then there's also your back itself and all of those muscles that attach to the shoulder blades and its ability. So, you know, basically your scapula, think of this is your rib cage. Your scapula literally has to move this way around the rib cage, and it has to, you know, depress, and of course it has to move at every angle. I'm trying not to use clinical terms, but I keep it simple. Bottom line is it has to be able to rotate and move, you know, and elevate and be depressed. So there's a lot of end ranges depending on where you're going, and it's all rotational. Absolutely, it's a lot going on for sure.
Thanks. Sorry for hijacking.
I apologize at all. Reach out and contact me personally if I can help in any other way.
Thank you.
I have a question. When you're talking about doing pull-ups and everything, and I just asked this in the chat, and one other person had the same situation that I did, which is when I try to practice pull-ups a lot, and during periods that I'm also playing a lot, I find that around my elbow starts to hurt, so I have to stop doing pull-ups and then switch over to some other exercises. Is there like something I could be doing differently, or some way to build that strength in that muscle so that I can still be doing that?
Carolyn, it's a great question. You know, listen, as mallet players, and this is kind of the conversation that I had a little bit with David when I was in Philly. This is chronic overuse we're all struggling with. It's like me as a runner and going out and running for mile upon mile. The nature of what we do as vibists means that we're at risk of chronic overuse, tendonitis type injuries in everything that we do. So depending on your hand position on the bar, and I should just clarify, so we're talking about the same thing. A pull-up by definition is where you get wide on the bar and your palms are facing away from you. That's a pull-up. A chin-up is where you turn your palms up, right, in a supine position, and your hands are closer together. So this is by definition a chin-up. And this is often the position that a lot of people will suffer from some tendonitis or tennis elbow, something you're probably referring to. So my suggestion is understand, by the way, you know, just know that you're using a lot of the same tissues. You're tensioning the same tissues that you do when you play. So you're risking overuse. But two, from a practical point of view, change your hand position on the bar. Alter your hand position, right? So I have one of those bars that has handles this way. Try a different grip, bring your hands closer together. If you're doing a chin up, by the way, an unsafe position to be in is with your hands wide like this. There's a lot of internal rotation there, and you can get some impingement in the biceps tendon and also in the elbow. So if you're doing a chin up, bring your hands closer together. That may relieve it, but otherwise just alter your hand position as much as you can. And understand you may be beating on tissue that's already tired.
Can you talk about lower back pain? Because I think that's something every mallet player, especially if you don't take care of yourself, like
Yeah.
me.
So Tony, we live in an assless world. There are no asses anywhere. I marvel at the people I see on a daily basis who do not have an ass. Right? Tom's laughing. But listen, man, you don't have an ass, Tony. Come on. I mean, listen, low back pain happens very simply, because our backs are forced to be our hips. Right? Very proud of my hips. Mrs. loves it when we're on the beach. She says, all the girls are looking at me, you know, I love that. No, seriously. Our backs pretending to be our hips. So the key is getting your hips moving and strengthening your hips so that you're no longer moving through your spine, right? You're moving through your hips. I did this one video for social media where I said how we move in many ways leads to some of the issues that we're dealing with. And when I say how we move on a daily basis. For example, if I'm going to reach down and pick up something off the floor, well, I can just reach down like this. And when I'm doing that, I'm largely moving through my spine. And the spine is designed to move, but we don't want to load it. And that's the key, especially this portion of our spine. So I can just bend over and reach and pick something up, something you've done 100 times, Tony. Or I can think of my hips as they're designed like a skewer. I can keep this stable and solid, and then I can hinge through my hips and reach down and pick something up. So now I'm bending my knees. This doesn't move. This stays the same. Now my hips are the hinge, right? That's what your hips are supposed to do. So as soon as you start moving through your spine on a daily basis, or loading it if you're doing exercise, all of those tiny little muscles get overworked and tight. Your hips stop moving as they should, and pain usually ensues. So it comes back to the hips, my friend.
So
I want to
what am I
add some.
doing? Oh, go ahead,
I'd like
go
to
ahead.
add some things to what Al said. I had back surgery early '90s, and after the fact, my surgeon said pick up things just like Al said. You stand up and you just use your knees to pick things up. Don't bend over and do that. Another thing that if I had known better before, don't pick up things, heavy things, and twist. That's the worst thing you could do. And that's probably one reason that my back went out lifting heavy equipment like amps and speakers and stuff. So do the lift, turn your whole body. Don't twist, because that puts too much pressure, and
Yeah.
that will.
Barry, it's those are great points, and they absolutely reinforce the same advice I would give. The one thing we have to remember is none of the things we're talking about in terms of the gradual degradation of our competency as human beings, our ability to move and do whatever it is we want to do. Those things never usually occur like in a one-shot kind of deal. Like one day I wake up and all of a sudden my back hurts. Very often we feel the symptoms in that way, but the process is gradual and it's over time, usually over a very long period of time. And then, one day, all of a sudden, there's a symptom and we think, hey, what happened? But again, it comes back to what I mentioned earlier about compensation. If we're moving every day, Barry, as you alluded to, and we're bending the spine, we got to remember the spine's like a coat hanger. The more we bend it and twist it, right, eventually it's going to break. It doesn't mean that the spine is designed to move. It's just a question of how we load it and how much repetition you know, whereas the hips are designed to be loaded and they're designed to allow us to move. The glute max is the largest muscle in our body, and we have the largest glute maxes of any animal on the planet relative to our size. Yet, as I said 10 minutes ago, we live in a glute max less society, in an ass less society, and also a society with chronic low back pain. So a huge amount of the work that I do every day is for the hips. It's the center of our body. It's the linchpin upon which everything else happens. Think of your automobile. Your chassis has to be stable and stiff and solid so that the wheel bearings, springs, and tires can perform their function, right? As Vibe players, our trunk, our hips have to be stable and strong so that our legs and arms and fingers can perform what it is that we want them to do. And very often the reverse is usually true. We usually have a lot more tension in our forearm than we actually can generate in our glute max, even though the muscle is 20 times the size. And then we wonder why we have leg pain, you know, from practicing. So it's really something to think about. Imagine your car's chassis was made of rubber and the tire was made of iron.
Oh my God.
How it would drive.
Wow.
Whoa, it's a crazy analogy. Hey, Al, I've got a question for you as a movement specialist. What are your opinions on Alexander technique?
Who's talking?
That's me. It's Tom. Hi.
Oh, okay.
Because I had to take a class on Alexander in high school, and I thought it was my first time that I had like seriously like thought about movement in like a really serious sense, and then just hearing you talk again, now I'm sort of reevaluating some of those thoughts. I was just curious what your opinions are on it for performers and such.
Yeah, Tom, what a great question. And here's the way I'll answer it. And I'm really familiar with Alexander technique. You know, as human beings, it is our nature, I think, to want to latch onto a methodology and make it about that methodology. And this is true with nutrition. It's like religion. You know, as soon as you talk to a vegetarian, it's like, man, you're going to die if you eat that cow. Man, you are going to absolutely die. It becomes religious, right? And they latch onto these, whatever. Fitness is exactly the same way. So I encourage you to not think about a methodology, but think about principles and philosophy, right? Because what I do is I'm a fascial stretch therapist. That's one company, right? And they think and that company preaches that fascial stretch therapy is the answer to all your issues, right? I worked with a chiropractor for 10 years in clinic. Chiropractic teaches that you get an adjustment and that'll fix all your problems, including your sex life, and it'll even make you a better improviser, right? Which is complete bullshit, right? I'm also a functional range conditioning mobility specialist. So they teach that, you know, and why do these different companies and methodologies teach these things? Because they want you to buy their program and become one of their, right? So here's the thing. Understand more about the body and pick and choose based on principles and philosophy, right? What's your philosophy about how you're thinking about your body? Because it's really simple. Joints need to move, tissues need to be stressed in order to adapt. And we got to start with the basics and fundamentals first, right? This is the biggest issue in the fitness industry. We never start at the basics and fundamentals, right? Here's an example. I mean, I don't want to hammer CrossFit. I think there's a lot of benefits to it, but CrossFit gyms are incredibly popular. But you can go into a CrossFit gym and pick up a barbell in about 24 hours. And I will tell you that could be the worst mistake you make, because if you're in the situation that Barry was in right before he had his surgery, but you didn't know it, that could be the difference between you having back problems for the rest of your life. And I can't even tell you the amount of people I've known that have blown out their backs picking up something when their bodies were not ready. So with every athlete I work with, I don't care if they've done the Ironman triathlon or they're an experienced runner or they're a recreational athlete. You start at the beginning, right? What is core stability? How do you create it? We're going to lie on your back and I'm going to teach you that, right? What is that? Does that joint move as it should? Is your hip a hip? If your hip's not a hip, if your hip doesn't move as a hip should, then nothing else matters, because it's all going to be compensation from the get-go, right? And if we can embrace that philosophy, then I can pull from Alexander, and I can pull from FRC, and I can pull from, functional movement systems, and I can pull even from CrossFit, right? And I can eliminate the shit and the junk that's going to dramatically raise my risk of injury. But there are some elements that I can pull from it that I can benefit from. So that's the way I would say, that's what I would say. I mean, I guess.
I think that's super on point. That's the same thing you have to do just being a musician, right? You're gonna have so many different.
Man. This is all music. It's just a completely different context, and context matters, right? But yeah, man, as artists, we, fundamentally we're pulling from all of these influences, and we have to flush it, process it, and understand it, and what the impact is on us as individuals. So I take athletes on a 3-phase, it's really 4 because 4 is rinse and repeat, a 3-phase training process. In the beginning, it's basics and fundamentals. You don't get any freedom to play around with basics and fundamentals. You got to demonstrate competency at every level. And you don't get the chance to crap around with stuff. You can't go pick up heavy stuff and think you can throw it around. Phase 2, once you're there and you understand those basics, then phase 2 is where you begin to dance on the edge of your ability, right? So think of it like learning how to skateboard, right? Once you're at that level where you can get on the skateboard and you can start to move it, now you're dancing on the edge of your ability. Now you're challenging your body, but on a platform of basics and fundamentals first. Phase 3 is where you can explore, right? But choose wisely where you explore, because every movement carries risk and reward. That's why I say box jumps, which are really popular in gyms, are the stupidest exercise in the world, because the reward for that, to jump off a box and land, is really small, but the risk is really high if something is not controlled when you land, right? Your back, your knee, your ankle, what have you. So in phase 3, choose wisely, but you can explore more. Again, to get back to what we were saying, this is music, man. In music, you have to be a master of your, Tony, this is why I love you, man. And I always will, because everything you teach, like you said it in the workshop, listen, you got to learn your voicings. You got to be able to move around. You got to know 2/5 in every key, because if you have that as your basic and fundamental skill set, then your ability to express yourself on a higher level is that much greater, right? And of course, everybody doesn't want to do that work. Everybody wants to, at that next phase, right?
Yeah, it's amazing how it all ties in.
Yeah, it's all the same. It's all the same. It really is. At some point, you got to be disciplined and be willing to do the uncomfortable work. But the rewards are incredible. And I can say this now. I could share my screen and show you guys a picture of my father at 59 years old. He died at 65 of a glioblastoma, a brain cancer. He looked 85 years old at 59. And he worked in a shipyard, and I miss him dearly. But at the end of the day, the maybe the scariest and also most empowering thing that all of us could ever deal with is the idea that fundamentally it's up to us. We have the control. We have the control to become better musicians, better human beings, stronger, more stable, more mobile. But that's a scary thing, because it comes back to individual responsibility, which is, by the way, the thing I've hated most about COVID, is because the media and the medical establishment, who, by the way, don't make money if you're not sick. Just remember that. The hospitals don't make shit money from me, because I've never taken a prescription drug in my life. Not once. Never. For 61 years. They don't make any money from me. So you got to remember that. right? What is their motivation? But in this whole COVID thing, it's been about placing responsibility on other people, right? Like, you better wear your mask so you can protect me. Well, when somebody looks at me and says that, I'm like, listen, I got my own mask. It's inside my body, right? Your health is your responsibility, not mine, fundamentally. And we know in this virus, as in any chronic disease, that the greatest risks are to those people with comorbidities and illnesses who are not healthy fundamentally. And I'll finish this by saying this: the absence of disease does not mean good health. That's not health, right? So you're looking at yourself in the mirror and say, well, I don't have cancer, I don't think. I don't have hypertension, I don't think. I'm not dealing with congestive heart failure. I don't have type 2 diabetes, I don't think. I'm healthy. Well, not really.
Oh,
I've got a question. Left foot, right foot. Warren Wolf plays with both feet. Some people play using the pedal with the left foot, right foot. What's your opinion?
Oh, Mike, I mean, listen, those, whatever you practice, you'll get good at it if you relentlessly approach it. I mean, the body is amazing in its ability to adapt. It's just about repetition, right? But other than that, listen, I'm not the guy to ask 5 questions, Sue, I grew up as a fan of Gary's. I was in Boston. I was there in the late 70s.
So maybe I'll be real specific. I switch because I feel like I lock my hip when I'm using one. And I recently learned about locking your hip, like locking your knees. And then I just slouch to one side and I sit on that.
Yep.
So I switch, so being in one position, is that detrimental to our one side?
Mike, great question. Great question. Listen, by the way, if I'm talking too long on any of these topics, just tell me to shut up. And I mean that. But that's a fantastic question. So anytime you put a joint into a certain position and leave it there chronically, if the joint is not supported well, it will absolutely wear out and you will have problems down the road. I remember working once with a woman who was a runner. I'm going back probably 15 or more years. She had some running related injuries. She came into our gait lab and it was a hip issue, and we couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And it was really problematic for her. And after a deep dive into everything about what this woman did and how she did it, we found out it was how she was sleeping. And so she got herself into the same position every night when she was sleeping, where she was lying on her side and she crossed her leg a certain way and she positioned the joint this way. And so she was into her 40s by this point. So she literally had years of the joint spending this, in this particular position for any one of a number of hours per day. I don't think she's running now, and I don't think she was ever able to run. There was too much deterioration within the joint. It was a serious issue by the time she came to see us. So yes, to answer your question, switching up and moving around is a great practice to relieve chronic stress in any one position. But I'll add to this. In today's day and age, in today's media-driven fitness world, we think of sitting as the new smoking. Everybody's like, how bad sitting is for you, and how we all need standing desks now because sitting is worse than ever. There's no problem with sitting. What there is a problem with is weak or unstable asses that make a sitting position a problem position to be in. Because when your hips are flexed, right, and flexion is this, right? By the way, can you all do this? Stand on a single leg and balance with your eyes closed. Really important, really important. But if I'm sitting and I'm in this position, my hips are stretched out and essentially flaccid. So if I spend hours a day in that position, my core is disengaged, my hips are stretched out and flaccid, my low back's going to take all the stress. But if my hips are stable and strong and my core is functioning as it should, I can sit all day. It's not a problem. Not a problem. So to answer your question, Mike, adjusting your position with the pedal is a great strategy to relieve any one joint from taking too much load. But look at it more holistically. Make your entire body stronger so that whatever position you're in, your body is able to meet the demand and not be stressed in the process in a negative way.
I suggest we wind things down. And Al, I know you're a great guy, and I know if I asked you to come back sometime, that you would probably say yes.
I mean, I love teaching and sharing what I've learned because I've made all the mistakes. And this is, you know, this is my life's passion, man, and it's frustrating. So when I say frustrating, you know, we really have to be so careful about what the media feeds us and what the predominant messages are, because we have to remember it's big pharma and big food that are running this country. And I say that, you know, I'm not left or right or any other damn thing. I could care less about politics. I'm just talking about where the profits reside, right? And where the messages are coming from. So that's the frustrating thing for me, is trying to sort of scream in an empty room to, you know, counter the messages that we're all getting every day. So I would just, you know, Tony, I'll come back anytime and I'll share in any way I can. But leave here today, all of you, with this idea that if it's going to be, it's up to me. We have to all take individual responsibility for our health and act every day to try to move ourselves in the right direction. And then lastly, I'll say this. I don't know why, like Tony, and I'm going to call you out here. You hardly ever reach out to me for advice. You go into this fitness rabbit hole where you're like, okay, I think I'm doing the right thing for myself. I think I should do this exercise. I'm not really sure, should I? But as a Vibe player, you would say, no, man, come into Vibe's workshop, go through the lessons, ask people who have been there what the best path is, shorten your learning curve, reach out to me more often, my friend, and I will point you in the direction of the specific things that you need to do to progress. In other words, we all have to reach out to mentors and other people that have been the path that we want to go. And remember, you got to walk the talk. Like, I will never go into a doctor's office and take advice from a doctor who's overweight, who can't move. Because why in the hell would I listen to anything that that individual has to say? No way. You gotta be the person, right? If you're going to give the advice, you got to walk the talk. Again, the same in music, right? The same in music. So Tony, reach out more.
Yeah, I'll reach out more. I agree. But the stuff I do the stuff that we've done. And okay. I keep saying we should stop, and I have a list of questions.
Yeah, let's do it again. This is fun. It was a pleasure to meet all you guys, by the way. I really mean that sincerely.
Thank you for coming, Al. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, we'll get more people. We'll put, I think this is so important for percussionists and musicians, just to kind of
better human beings, man. Better human beings gives you the opportunity to be a better artist.
Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, it breaks my heart to know that there are people that have left us too soon for reasons that maybe could have been avoided. And we've been robbed of that artistry, right? Yeah. And so I wish for all of you that you can continue to express yourself and play and become better players, because it's an endless process until you're very, very, very old. And then one day you go to sleep and don't wake up. And that's the way I approach life.
Yeah.
I mean, they're by the great big Iowa line. Anything could happen. I get hit by a car riding my bike, but
Oh, can I ask you something?
Okay, but wait. We should end this.
All right.
But if you want to do the last question, then do the last question and let's go. But I just, and you guys can outvote me, but I think we do these things for 3 hours and everyone's burnt out.
yeah.
And then it's
I
just
have
not
to
the,
go eat now. I have to go eat. So
yes. All right. Do you want to ask the last question?
Yeah. No, what about if you don't have a choice? Because as a vibraphone player, you know, I don't know how many of you are tall, but I'm 190. So if you're reading most of the time, if you're at school and if you don't have a choice and the vibraphone is very low, what you doing? Because we are busy very often reading, sight reading, and my head is like this all the time down.
Yeah.
So then I have problems here somewhere. I don't know.
buy a Malatech Omega.
Or play by minders. What do you say?
We have to adapt, and the better human beings we are, the stronger, more mobile, more stable we are, the easier it is to adapt. But we also have to make our world work for us in the best way that we can ergonomically. So position the instrument in the best way that you can to relieve those kinds of chronic stresses.
I knew a tall guy that carried dog bowls around with him and put them under the instrument. For some reason, dog bowls work the best for him.
I always used to carry little 4x4 blocks that were put under a Musser M55 xylophone. If you're familiar with those, an instrument I played a lot, was just really low, and I couldn't stand playing it. So it raised the instrument up by about 2 to 3 inches.
All right.
Oh, I think Randy's trying to show us what he does to make his vibe taller. I just saw him get up and then turn his camera off.
The camera let go of its connection.
I was going to say his camera just completely disconnected. He's actually not even having.
Sorry about that.
You guys have a great day.
Oh.
Yeah.
I do use
Thanks,
blocks,
Al.
though.
All right. Bye-bye.
My pleasure.
And everybody else will see you next time.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks, Tom. See you guys.
Thank you,
Thank
Al.
you so much.
All right, I'll host the recording on YouTube. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.